I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Richard Nixon announcing his resignation 50 years ago today. Welcome to the Newsmax Daily for Thursday, August 8th, 2024. On August 9th, 1974, Nixon did resign after being ordered by the Supreme Court to turn over secretly recorded White House tapes to congressional investigators, evidence of his part in the Watergate cover-up. Richard Nixon became president by defeating Vice President Humphrey, who became the Democrats' nominee after Lyndon B. Johnson became the first president to pull out of the presidential race. 56 years later, Vice President Kamala Harris has become the nominee, as President Biden became only the second president to pull out of a presidential race. And with 88 days to go, the race for the White House has now shifted into high gear.
So, Wisconsin, this has been a big week. On Monday, I officially became the Democratic nominee for President of the United States.
I think it's really disgraceful, both for Kamala Harris, but also for a lot of the American media that participates in this stuff, to have a person who has been the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party for 17 days and refuses to take a single question from the American media. Now, it's well known, of course, that President Trump and I will go anywhere, we'll answer any question, because we respect the American people enough to actually ask them for their vote, rather than sit in front of a teleprompter, read scripted lines, and run away from every reporter and every actual citizen who's going to decide this election. I think it's a scandal, and I think the vice president should be ashamed of herself. So hopefully our reporters out there in the audience will start doing their job a little bit and going and demanding that Kamala Harris actually answer to the American people.
Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance, Vice President Harris, and her new running mate campaigned in Wisconsin yesterday. Greg Kelly starts us off.
All right, Governor Tim Walz. Walz. I keep hearing, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's a regular person. He's a Midwest. Forget all that stuff. He is a liar. He has been busted. I can't believe it. Did they do any vetting? This, if we had a healthy culture, a healthy country, this guy would not have passed any vetting. I don't care if you vet for an afternoon or 6 months. They should have caught this. This guy is guilty of stolen valor. Yes, the brand new Democrat vice presidential nominee, Governor Tim Walz. Walz or Walz? I don't really care. I don't think he's going to be around for that long. He shouldn't be, after we discovered this.
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and Dad said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back. And I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment. But we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states. And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Right there. It's one of the worst things you can do if you ever, were an American citizen, served in or out of uniform. He just claimed to have fought in a war, and he did not. He did not. Carried a weapon in war. You heard it. Just so we all know, all right? We can make sure those weapons of war that I carried in war are only carried in war. Well, he didn't, all right? I keep hearing about his National Guard career. And you can join the National Guard, and that's great. But the only place this guy deployed to was Italy, all right? Everybody needs to understand he did not go into combat, as he just said. He just said he went to war. And guess what? He just committed a federal crime, potentially. There was a crime against this. It's called the Stolen Valor Act of 2013. And it reads and follows, you can go to jail for a year, technically. However, with the intent to obtain money, property, or other tangible benefit, fraudulently holds oneself out to be a recipient of a decoration or medal described in the subsection, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 1 year or both.
That's former Marine Greg Kelly, host of Greg Kelly Reports, 9 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. And you can be sure our resident Navy SEAL, Carl Higbie, who served in the Iraq War, had plenty to say.
Okay, Tim, what weapon and in what war did you carry it in? J.D. Vance had the same question today.
Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not.
Now, everybody is asking him this question, including, finally, the press pool is.
Governor, Vance accused you of stolen valor. Your response? Governor, Vance accused you of stolen valor. Your response?
Guy didn't even try to answer the question. This needs to be asked every single day, folks. This is super important. Look, this is the cardinal sin among veterans, to claim military service that you did not do. It's so verifiable that I'm like beside myself that someone would say they went to war when they didn't. Especially when guys like him got out of the military because they were being called to war. The center of all this, all of his political campaigns have been, oh, look at me, I'm a veteran. And it's like Tim Walz either didn't notice or think we would notice, or maybe that we're too dumb to comprehend, like most Democrats. He just lies with impunity and thinks that therefore that's the truth. Yesterday at his rally, he took a jab at Trump. And look, I was like, bro, this is not going to end well for your political career.
First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself.
Look, I'm tired of I'm tired of your bone spur talking point from Vietnam. Okay, look, Trump was not in the military, but you want to talk about service, dude? Trump almost got shot in the head 3 weeks ago. He took one in the ear instead and stood up and yelled, fight, 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 and then went out and did another rally like 2 days later. DJT is a billionaire who could be sitting on a private beach somewhere that he owns, drinking margaritas in the sun, but nope. Instead, he's getting prosecuted in deep blue jurisdictions for things that aren't even crimes. In one case, by a prosecutor who was illegally appointed, who raided his Mar-a-Lago home. DJT spends every day getting crapped on by like 90% of the media, who just prior to him running as a Republican, they used to love him. Don't lecture me about service, Tim. You got a military paycheck for 24 years to prepare for war. And the second they called your name, you dipped out. You joined the military, but then when you were called to do the one thing the military trained you to do and counted on you doing, which is go to war, you bailed, Tim Walz. Just like you bailed on supporting our veterans when you were in Congress. One of Tim's former colleagues weighed in on this yesterday. Representative Jim Banks said on Twitter, quote, I served my first 2 years in Congress with Tim Walz on the House Veterans Committee. Walz opposed the most important veteran legislation passed in decades just because it was President Trump's. The Mission Act was very bipartisan, but Walz opposed giving our veterans better access to health care because he didn't want to give President Trump a win. Wow. Wow. This tells you everything you need to know about this guy.
Retired Navy SEAL Carl Higbie is the host of Frontline. That's 5 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. And just to be clear, the statement that Carl was just reading was a Twitter post, an X post from Indiana Representative Jim Banks, who served in the House of Representatives with Tim Walz before he became governor of Minnesota. The Harris-Walz campaign and most of the media is saying that Walz retired months before the Iraq deployment and didn't know anything about it. Now, you know the temperature is getting way high when CNN starts correcting Democrats, right? Jim Acosta, of all people. Well, he sort of unwillingly corrected Minnesota Senator Tina Smith live on the air when she falsely claimed that J.D. Vance never served in the military, or at least to her knowledge hadn't served in the military. Rob Finnerty has more on that with Wisconsin Congressman Derrick Van Orden on Wake Up America this morning.
Congressman, it's great to have you on this morning. So you served our country for 26 years as a retired SEAL, as I said. Stolen valor is a serious thing. To me, Walz and Kamala have a big problem. How do you think military families are going to react to this?
Well, good morning. Listen, I'm the longest serving enlisted member of Congress in the history of our country. Fact check that, Walz. Here's the issue. He was the acting command sergeant major for his unit. That's the senior enlisted advisor for his unit. He found out that his unit was going to be deployed to combat in Iraq, and he retired. That is a cardinal sin in the military. And I was speaking to my wife and some other military spouses over the last couple of days when we found this out. They're more angry than the service members are, because what Walz did was sent other service members into combat in his stead and left those wives and husbands wondering if their spouses are going to come back alive, because he wanted to sit in the United States and hide on his couch. This is absolutely unforgivable. He was not a retired command sergeant major. He retired as a master sergeant. That's an E8. It's the same pay grade that I retired as. He was not the most senior ranking enlisted person to serve in Congress. That's a lie. He knows it's a lie. He said that he carried weapons in war, and he didn't. So I don't really think that civilians understand how serious this is. This man sent other people to combat in his stead so that he could hide under his couch in the United States of America. He has absolutely no business in public service, and God forbid he would ever become the president of the United States and the commander-in-chief of all the military when he sent his men to combat in his stead.
Yeah, somebody he served with, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Behrens. Again, this is according to Alpha News. He said that Walz abandoned the brave men and women of his unit who went to Iraq. Some died. Behrens claimed that he lied and tried to spin why he suddenly retired. My fear, Congressman, is that the media is not going to report that part of the story. And he got away with it. He was elected to what? 6 terms in Congress in Minnesota, and then he was elected to governor of Minnesota in 2018. Nancy Pelosi said this yesterday. Take a listen.
J.D. Vance has criticized him as never having been in combat. And,
has he? Has he?
Well,
has J.D. Vance been in combat?
Well, I think he was over in Iraq, I think, as a public relations officer, as a communications officer. I think that's the case.
All right. And then, Congressman, this is CNN yesterday. This is call for number 5, comparing Tim Walz's service record to J.D. Vance.
Well, here is Tim Walz, who enlisted when he was 17 years old. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. And I'm not aware of any military service that J.D. Vance has ever served. So let's just make the comparison there. And what happened in the tragedy of the killing of George Marines, Floyd and then the unrest. Yeah, okay. Pardon me for that.
Congressman, when it comes to Walz, when the going got tough, he got going. He retired, still had 2 years. He enlisted for 6 years, still had 2 years to go. His unit went to Iraq. But do you hear what they're doing? And it's subtle, but they're basically making the claim that J.D. Vance didn't serve our country. He served our country, but he came back and then went to college, went to a war zone, went to Iraq. What do you make of that and the way they're trying to spin the records of both these men who will one day be on the debate stage together?
What they're trying to do is cover for Tim Walz. Tim Walz is a coward. J.D. Vance deployed to combat, and I don't care what capacity he did. When you go to my office, please come by in D.C., you'll see all the service symbols up there, or the SEALs, and on there is the Wisconsin National Guard. I have that right next to all the active duty SEALs, because the enemy doesn't care if you're a National Guardsman. The enemy doesn't care if you're a reservist. The last 3 casualties we sustained, KIAs, were all reservists. Those are in in Jordan, and no one cared. The enemy doesn't care if you're a reservist or a National Guardsman. They're looking at the flag on your shoulder. The American flag is what the enemy targets. They couldn't target Walz's flag because he was in Minnesota. So I really want to stress to everybody that by him abandoning his men, he has abandoned and given up his ability for public service. I can't believe that he got elected to dog catcher, let alone a congressman, and now he is the vice presidential candidate for the Democrat Party.
Wisconsin Congressman and Navy veteran Derrick Van Orden on Wake Up America. Now, Rob mentioned that the 2 men will be facing off in a debate, right? Vance and Walz. We will also, of course, have a presidential debate. And hopefully, the debates will expose the false narratives and all the unwarranted hype in the media, just like the last debate exposed President Biden. who actually has an event on the White House calendar today. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. First, Emma Rechenberg and Sean Kreisman spoke with some of the nation's top pollsters where Trump and Harris are with the American people right now.
John McLaughlin is with us. John Zogby here as well. Okay, so John McLaughlin, since we're talking some battleground states, we had a poll that we'd like to ask you about. The latest one showing that they're virtually in a tie. Trump and Harris neck and neck in Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Trump having a slight edge on Harris in Georgia, North Carolina, whereas Harris leads in Nevada and Wisconsin barely. McLaughlin, can you talk to us about what we're seeing in this poll?
Well, certainly, because after she's gotten the Harris honeymoon, where she's gotten 2.5 weeks or more of great press. And really, yesterday was the first day that you saw her come out and speak, and it was at a rally. But she hasn't held a press conference. She hasn't been held accountable. So with all that press, we're very happy to be where we are. Last week, we had a poll out that Trump was up 2 nationally. In June, before the debate with Biden, we were up 2 nationally. So these battleground states, we're running like we're behind, and we're running really hard. But I'll tell you what, it's a great position to be in compared to where we were in 2016 and 2020. And with Harris now picking Walz, who's probably, as President Trump said, this is the most extremely liberal ticket the Democrats have ever nominated. It's an opportunity for us to really define them on the issues. And that hasn't happened over the last 2.5 weeks during the Harris honeymoon.
Speaking of that, John Zogby, the same poll that we're showing you from CBS showing Kamala Harris has a slight lead over Trump when it comes to the choice of president. This is among likely voters. This is an overall, as you know, battleground states, that's really where it counts when you really want some results here. But if you throw RFK in there and other names, you see there is a 2-point bump that Harris is receiving. I'm just curious how long the so-called honeymoon phase in terms of polling would last. John Zogby.
Boy, the rules have changed so much because we're so hardened and we're at equilibrium. And so Harris being within 2 points or Trump being within 2 points, that's the bump. You know, that's the post-GOP convention bump. Trump went up by a couple. That's the post-Harris announcement. She went up by a couple. And you look at the battleground states, those are tied, or Harris now up 1. Fundamentally, we're going to go into November with this being neck and neck. I don't think there are any big bumps. I don't think there are any big catastrophes that could change the nature of this until maybe at the very last minute when some undecideds start to break. But this is where we are. Look at 49-47. I wouldn't rest easily on that one.
Pollster John Zogby, senior partner at the Zogby Strategies on National Report. It's beginning to look like the 2016 election with Hillary Clinton in more ways than one.
So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's tight.
That was yesterday in Wisconsin. Does she know Wisconsin isn't in the South? Why all of a sudden does she have a Southern accent? Remember this?
I don't feel no ways tired.
At least Hillary Clinton was quoting somebody, right? James Cleveland. I'm not sure what Harris was doing. In other news, I mentioned President Biden finally had an event on the calendar today. He's welcoming the world champion Texas Rangers to the White House. Oh, before that, he does have a phone call, maybe a Zoom call, with some Hawaii officials commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the tragic wildfires there. Then he'll be partying it up with the Texas Rangers, and you know that means he'll be getting a World Championship Texas Rangers jersey with his name on the back, so we'll see what he has to say at that event. Meanwhile, David Weiss, the special counsel overseeing Hunter Biden's investigation, says a Romanian oligarch tried to use his business connections with Hunter to gain influence with the Biden administration. Well, my. Weiss's office says the oligarch hired Hunter simply because he wanted to attempt to influence U.S. government agencies. That is according to a court filing that was released yesterday. I expect sometime today or tonight that we will be hearing from Congressman James Comer or Jim Jordan, or perhaps both, who are heading up the investigation, the House investigations into the Bidens. The United States is now sending Navy fighter jets to a military base in the Middle East, this after deploying several warships over the weekend. I told you about that back on Monday. According to the Pentagon, today, dozens of jets from the USS Theodore Roosevelt have been sent to help defend Israel. And on Wall Street, stocks are once again starting out well into the green, but yesterday faded kind of quickly. We'll see what happens today. You can keep up with all of the news all day today and tonight at Newsmax, Newsmax.com, and on Newsmax Plus for the most complete lineup of all of your favorite shows and hosts and guests like Rob Schmidt tonight, Greg Kelly Reports, Greta Van Susteren, Carl Higbie, Bianca De La Garza, Wake Up America. There's documentaries, special programming, and so much more. Go to NewsmaxPlus.com. Make sure you get signed up. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily Podcast. Please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Share it with your friends and family as well. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to Newsmax.com. Start today. Newsmax is real news for real people.